going to have the Q&A, and we're going to have anything that any detransitioner wants to say. Is the time. This is it. Shut me up and just get it out. So I might ask you a question. You could say, no, I'm not going to answer that. But what I am going to say is, I didn't get a chance earlier to say this, this, and this. And now, zip it, Stella, and I'm going to say it. So I think all these questions, I'm going to ask the first question, and then somebody put their hand off and take it off, really, from there. Just to remind everybody, there is a conversation with myself and Ciara Bell, pre-recorded, really reflective, interesting conversation, and it'll be coming up after the Q&A, so we'll kind of close it up, because this has been epic, literally, for once, and we'll close it up and we'll put on the pre-recording. It's a really good conversation with me and Ciara. I think it is, anyway. Ciara's a really reflective person. So the first question, a question that combines two different people's similar questions. What can parents do to make it easier for trans-identified people to walk back their transition and commitments without their kids worrying that we'll say, we told you so? Any takers?
Well, there really isn't any fear that, as long as you're not a terrible parent that would say, I told you so. You know, if your child is going through something like that and they want to come to you and say, you know, I thought this, but I was wrong, or whatever. I mean, what mother or father in their right mind would turn around and go, I told you so? Like, just don't behave like that to your children.
The kids will fear that the parents will say it. It's
Yeah,
not necessarily
yeah.
the parents will say
well,
it.
then, fair enough. I don't know. I suppose that, well, you're not going to know unless the child comes to you, or you're not going to know with any level of certainty. So if they do come to you and say that to you, then obviously don't be a dick about it. But if you've just got a very strong hunch, and you want to talk to them about it, then just, you know, don't put anything on them. Just say to them, you know, is there anything you want to talk about? You know, no matter what you say, I'll always love you. Even if the kid comes out and says something ridiculous like, I'm demisexual, just be like, okay, Billy, that's fine. We still love you. Like, don't disown your children just because they've picked up a ridiculous identity.
I know. Laura, you put your hand up, and then who's after? First Laura, and then Carol.
Yeah, so I would say, in terms of the parents kind of being supportive after the detransition, I would say that my point of view is always that the gender issues and the transition was just a coping mechanism for something else. And basically, I will use this as an excuse to talk about the attachment issues some more, because all of these things, what they have in common is attachment issues, like basically just not being loved or understood properly by your caregivers or peers. Or if you're autistic, you're not relating to other people, you don't have role models, you don't have positive attachment figures, and especially for parents and families. And so I'll say, like, I feel like a lot of, well, at least for me, then other people, you know, like they didn't get that before the transition. So of course they would be concerned about how their parents would react after the detransition. So I would say, if you're a parent who maybe made some mistakes, or even if you didn't, but we all make mistakes, and some worse than others. But if there was issues, a lot of the times the attachment in the relationship is affected by the transition and by the distancing that the child had from their parents, both natural during like normal development and puberty and becoming an adult, but also from whatever issue, mental health issues that they're going through. So I would say use this as an opportunity to not just talk about the gender issues and affirm the DeTrans. I don't want to say affirm, but you know, support the detransition. Use this as an opportunity to try and find a point of honesty and connection that you might not have had before. Because chances are that even if you don't know if anything is wrong, you probably still have sense that there's some distance going on between you and your child. And the child definitely senses it. And I do believe, and this isn't, I don't think this is just my own bias, but I definitely believe that a lot of these issues come from not having proper attachments. So you know, you'll be able to sort of kill two birds with one stone, or you'll be able to maybe help the initial issues that were present to begin with that were never addressed, which is why the transition might have even happened. So if you can address, you know, like you don't want to like love bomb the kid, right? You don't want to like just suddenly like go from like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, give you your space, I don't really understand this, or be dismissive of the gender stuff. You don't want to like turn a 180 and then suddenly go and be like, oh yeah, you know, actually I want to be best friends and let's like do stuff together and whatever, you know, if you're their parent. But give them space and let them know that you are interested in who they are now and who they've always been. Don't rub it in their face that they used to be one way and should be that way again or whatever. But just try to use this as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship. I have talked to some parents who say that this is like optimistically a good thing that's happened to their family because it's brought them closer to their child and it's made them reflect on their own parenting and their own identities and role modeling and mentoring that they're doing for that kid, and made them sort of evolve in their own thinking about it and strengthen the bond. So that's what I would advise. Like, use this as an opportunity for support that extends far beyond the gender stuff to strengthen the relationship, because that's going to be the major thing that is going to help everybody involved.
Yeah, that's a really lovely way to approach it. Really, really lovely. Carol, were you going to say something?
No, I have nothing to add.
Really?
Yeah, she summed it up.
I'll go to the next question and you might have something. It combines, again, two people's similar questions. What is the balance between the number of young lesbians who have internalized homophobia versus the number of young women who had experiences like Helena? That's interesting.
Well, some might not like my answer.
Go on, then.
But I'm coming from a more radical feminist view on this. I think there are crossovers between all women and girls with this, because we're all growing up in a culture that belittles women and female in a lot of ways. You know, we aren't viewed as equal to men in so many ways. You know, all the way down to the little boy that wants to play with the girls' toys, and the parent, you know, I've seen mothers and fathers both do this. No, that's for girls. Why is that? Why is something that's for girls bad and gross? Why is throwing like a girl bad? Why is being a pussy bad? I mean, there's all these things that we grow up with as women that make us feel shitty. And I think we all cope with it in different ways.
Oh, that's a very good point. Sinead, you're on mute. You're on mute, Sinead. Sinead, you're on mute. Yeah.
I just had a whole epithet there that you missed. Yeah, Carol, I was just going to say, when it comes to the difference between, for example, it doesn't even need to be butch lesbians, actually, just like lesbian transitioners and heterosexual transitioners. The big difference really does seem to be who you're trying to appeal to. So if you're, for example, a biological female who's transitioning to male to appeal to women, you're going to try to put on, you know, what you think attracts women. But if you're a biological female who's attracted to women who transitions, that must have a different thing to it, no? Would it not?
I think that all the transitions coming from the same place. And I guess we could argue that transition for most people is all coming from the same place. It's escaping something. You just have to figure, you have to get to what you're trying to escape.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what seems like for women, we're trying to escape something about there's something around our sex that society puts on us that we don't want.
Yeah. Pursuit of pleasure, avoidance of pain could be the root of everything, really, couldn't it? There's a question for Robin about his 7-point list.
Hi.
How are you? Have you got that list to hand? And also you were going to talk a little bit about BIID.
Yeah, I just think that having transition as the be-all end-all cure for dysphoria, which is something that is sort of an amalgamation of many different mental disorders that could be dealt with individually is quite analogous to treating someone with body identity integrity disorder by willfully chopping off their limb, because you are rendering, if you go through with the surgery, it's really, it's not good. Let me just put it that way. So I don't see the difference in logic. I mean, you could easily look at a BIID case and think, wow, that's ridiculous, that's messed up, why would anyone allow that to go ahead? And then you look at a trans person and think it's stunning and brave. I just don't understand the difference, and that was a big wake-up call for me in my detransition.
Am I right in thinking you saw something online? And
I just saw like a reality TV documentary about some woman who blinded herself, and I just thought how horrible that is, and how she was affirmed in her insane delusions, and I was affirmed in my delusions that I could become the opposite sex, and that was the right pathway for me.
Right, okay. Another question, I don't know who wants to take this. How can some of the guests address, and I must go back to you, Robin, and ask about the 7-point, but I've gone on to this and then we'll go back to that. How can some of the guests address what might have been a better outlet for them in school, other than having teachers and all support staff forced into affirming this? I'm a teacher and this is rampant. Do you follow me? So it was school staff and affirmative. How should the school staff, approach this?
Is there anyone here that was actually trans-identified as a child?
I think maybe Limpida, do you want to speak?
I was going to say, so I work in education. I'm getting my certification right now. So, and I'm in a state where it's currently illegal for teachers to do anything but affirm. So we're required by law to use a student's preferred pronouns. Luckily, we're not in a state where we're required to conceal that from parents, but that's also something that's going on in the United States. I'm pretty sure Washington and New York have laws to that effect. Honestly, I really don't know. There's no easy answer with that. On one level, it's not our business as teachers. It's not, we shouldn't be getting involved in their lives in that way, acting as therapists. There's a lot, that's part of the reason why they're mandating that kind of thing in the first place, is because of changes in education, and now teachers are expected not to be educators so much, but more so like emotional management for troubled kids. And that's one of the reasons why they're able to push that kind of thing. But, and my argument for that is kind of like, we shouldn't have to, I'm trying to think like, how do I phrase this? It shouldn't really be the teacher's business to try to talk to them about something that personal.
It shouldn't be in schools. This is ridiculous.
Shouldn't be in school. Yeah, it shouldn't be in schools. It shouldn't be in schools. But the thing is,
it's going off their lane, because you could say that they should be teaching English or geography or maths, and really it's not for any teacher to kind of, is this what you're saying, to impose their views on gender or things like that? Is that where you're going?
I'm saying, like, if you come across a trans identified kid as a member of school staff, I'm saying, like, there's not very much you can do, and moreover, I'm not sure that there's very much you should do other than sort of make other people aware of the situation, right? I wouldn't just start talking to them as if like you're their best friend or something, because that's problems, right? That causes problems, that can get you in trouble, that can get you, people will be like, well, why are you like singling out this one kid, why are you talking to them privately, that kind of thing. It's tricky. I don't have a good answer for that, and I'm someone that's in the system, and I've been talking to teachers. I would talk to other teachers. I think that's what I would do. I went on Saturday. I went to Friday. So yesterday I went to a bar with a bunch of my colleagues, And specifically, we did not invite one teacher in particular that is like a 45-year-old non-binary woman with two non-binary kids. I don't know why she didn't come, but I don't think she was invited. And they asked me about, because they know I was trans because I DeTransed at work. So they asked me about it, and they were like, "What, what's up with that? What's the deal? What's your perspective on that? Because it's kind of a hot button right now." And I just spoke to them honestly about it, and most of them were very receptive, because I think to most normal people for whom this is not like a huge plank in their life, they see it as child abuse, and rightfully so. So I think you'll be surprised if you talk to your colleagues, like maybe you guys can form sort of your own game plan for what to do if that were to happen, along with colleagues that you trust. I wouldn't go with just random people, because of course there are those psychos that are in the schools that are listening all the time. I know I can't talk to certain administrators about it. I can't talk to the school therapist about it, because they would immediately say I'm not fit for the job.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky. I don't know how you would go about that other than to try to get involved in local politics and try to get the law changed,
Just
and
so
try to make parents aware of it.
yeah, people, just so people know, Genspect have a school guidance, and we also have a guidance about social transition, and it's very careful to help teachers create a neutral space, which isn't kind of rejecting, and it isn't celebratory, so that it's kind of create, because the teacher's job is to educate in whatever they're trained in, and that's what's important. There's a really good question here, but I don't know if anybody can answer it. Are there any good resources for women that are currently still taking testosterone but are dealing with pelvic pain? And they've been given estrogen supplementation to retain fertility. They're taking birth control. No, there's not. Is there not?
That very strongly depends on the pain they're experiencing. I experienced a very, very severe pelvic and abdominal pain on testosterone, and exercise cured it for me. But without actually speaking to the person, you don't know for certain. So I would say get more active, get checked out by your doctor, make sure that everything's okay, because you shouldn't,
Yeah.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends like how long after stopping testosterone
It
they're
depends on
having
so
pain
many
too,
things.
because so for some I've heard that it lasts a while, and it takes time for your body to get back. If you didn't have a hysterectomy, for example, it takes a while for everything to get back on track.
Yeah.
The best advice, and the thing is, we don't know. Doctors don't know either. So the best advice I would
Carol, that's the funniest fucking thing, is that we know more than the fucking doctors do.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
I experienced very severe abdominal cramps for about 14 months after ceasing testosterone. And I had that conversation with my GP, and he was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. I said, when it comes to this, you need to self-advocate and educate yourself on the stuff. And you have to be willing to go to the doctor and say, no, you will listen to me, or you will send me somewhere else. It's hard, but you have to do it.
Most people won't do that. Most people don't have.
I know, that's why I said they
not
have
even
not
even necessarily the confidence, but why should you have to? Why should you
I
have to
know.
go to your doctor?
I mean,
oh, you're wrong.
Well, it depends on the context, and it depends where the person is and where they're at. But if they're in pain and they want to get help, they might have to batten the door down. I want to ask one more question, and then we'll put on the Kira Bell interview. And I think this has gone on way longer, obviously, like 2 hours longer than it should have.
Okay, thanks, Stella.
Sorry about that, but it was so riveting. I couldn't shorten it. But I do think there'll be many more events. I've no doubt. There's been so many extraordinarily powerful speakers. The last question that I think I'd like to hear people say is, do you think the being in the trans, a couple of people have asked it, do you think being in the trans movement is like a cult, or is it cult-like?
No, absolutely.
As a cult.
Yeah, is it? It is.
It is. It absolutely is.
That's undeniable as a cult.
Okay, anybody else? Carol and Sinead, strong, yes?
Yes,
Laura,
It is
Michelle,
a cult.
Laura,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lampita, Michelle.
It's a body modification cult, essentially.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Look, that's not disparaging of all trans people, of course not. But the ideology itself, the idea that you must affirm, the idea that if you're 4 years old and you say you're the opposite sex, which means you are, the idea that you can simply claim to be something and automatically you are. Like, it's not individual trans people. Individual trans people are wonderful and beautiful and amazing, and we don't give a shit about them because they're just getting on with their lives. Individual trans people aren't the problem. The ideology is everything, and it absolutely takes the form of a cult. Sans the iconic individual leader, it is.
We could probably do a whole separate thing on this, which would be interesting because it really does need to be touched on.
It does.
Yes, and people fear it. Laura, you have your hand up there.
Yeah, so I've long thought that the body modification and the trans ideology was a form of spirituality. Like, even if you get away from the cultish, like political or religious organizational parts of it, I think just this idea that you can reach this sort of trans joy, aka like enlightenment or transcendence. Like, what is transcendence, right? I have a podcast on it, but transcendence, you're working towards these higher level goals, which is exactly like the transition process is supposed to give you. So you're working on these different goals to reach enlightenment. So transition is seen as a process of transcendence. And the whole thing is a metaphor for spirituality, because young people have lost spirituality. And I don't even mean religion. They've lost that, but also like just spirituality itself, like being able to deal with these intense and heightened emotional and intellectual and physical and physiological communal tribal experiences. I really do think it's all about finding spirituality, and that it's all symbolic of misguided transcendence.
I think you've got a really good point there. I think we're in a post-religious age, and it hasn't gone half as well as we thought it would. Religion left us, and I don't believe in any God, and yet I think we as a society are flailing. Robin, could you please tell us that 7-point gender dysphoria? I think you're going to be haunted about this.
I posted it in the chat a moment ago.
I know,
I'll post it
talk
again
to us.
just to make sure everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got to like OCD. I actually really wanted to talk about OCD because the desire to transition is definitely a compulsion in the way that it manifests. I really wanted to tear the testosterone out of the body. I mean, you only need to look at, I hear a lot of accounts from parents of boys who are shaving their arms every single day. Like, you can't tell me that's not like obsessive compulsive sort of desire. And also, I hear a lot of DeTrans or women talk about their obsession with wanting to stand to pee, and they get like these attachments so that they can stand to pee. And I think that's sort of OCD adjacent as well. And then I would say it's less convenient. I always sit down, but whether I be trans identifying or not.
I think there's a real argument for like trans ruminative OCD, that this is it's rumination, OCD, and they're fixated on trans. Some people get fixated on being a paedophile, and they're not a paedophile, but it's an OCD rumination, and it's a really distressing one. And it just feels incredibly like it in a very different way, and it's not the same thing, and I'm not, blah, blah. But the point is the rumination of a distressing point. Anyway, sorry, Robin, keep going.
If you listen to any account of, or simplified account of gender dysphoria, like, oh, they see a different person, or they obsessively want to change some part of their body, like body dysmorphia it's just so obviously OCD in every sense of the word. And I have other OCD manifestations, like I have nightmares a lot and nightmare daydreams, and I always ruminate on the worst possible outcome of every situation, and it's pretty debilitating. And the same goes for gender dysphoria. So I have a great deal of sympathy for people who are suffering, but I just don't think that transition is the silver bullet.
Okay, I think we better move on to Kira. I think I have to say a big thank you to everybody that contributed. Man, it's nearly 2 o'clock in Madrid. Hola to España.
Stella,
Adios to, yes,
Stella?
Sinead, yes.
can I be really cheeky and ask if everyone else can say 1 or 2 sentences that they want the people listening to hear?
Good idea. Very good. So anybody want to take it away? Each person say one or
I'll
two
go
sentences.
first.
Yeah, you go first. You said it all.
I really, really want the people who currently have within their abilities to do so, who are treating children. Doesn't need to be children. That's the most important part. You could be treating anyone of any age, but with the cash review and things like that, I really, really, really want people in the mental health field and the medical field to understand that everything that's happening right now, it's new. It's not set in stone. These children, they're a brand new demographic. It used to be grown men, now it's little girls. This is experimental. You're not being kind and inclusive and all this bullshit. You're experimenting on children. And I just put ideology aside, everything. I don't care if you're pro-trans. I don't care if you're for trans. I don't care if you hate detransitioners. I don't care. Just understand that what's happening right now is resulting in an enormous number of young people seeking help at clinics. And I would beg that you would give them the neutral, clinical, appropriate care that they deserve.
It's just distress, and it just needs to be treated. Anybody else who want to add a sentence or two? Anybody? Are you all exhausted?
No, I'll add something.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go a different direction, but like my presentation was all about how the medical profession is failing detransitioners, of course. And I just wanted to stress that even though a lot of our advocacy has to do with what we're telling other people they have to do and seemingly putting the blame on everyone else, I just want to stress the fact that we do partially blame ourselves. Everyone here owns up to the fact that we had some agency in this, even if there were other things that happened as well. And I just think that people need to know that, because you don't see it. You don't see us taking responsibility for it, because that's something we all do privately.
Because it gets censored.
I don't know. Very complicated. It's, oof. You know, when you're in mental distress, I'm just speaking as a therapist, Michelle, when all these people who come to me and they're in terrible distress, my job is to, like, on some level, if I'm any good at it, is to kind of minimize the hurt. You know what I mean? On some level, I don't know. Man, I find it very hard to apportion blame on anybody except the professionals, if I'm honest. I'll be honest. Laura, you had your hands up there, but I might be wrong.
Yes, I would like to say that, again, because I always like to look just layers underneath. So what I want to say is that all of these issues, all of these like manifestations of mental disorders and mental illnesses and criteria for being trans and all these different reasons, they are all, you know, if you take kind of a larger, like a macro sort of lens, I obviously look at things microscopically, but if you take a macro lens, we are all exhibiting traits of the human condition. And I think a lot of this is due to dehumanization of these various things. Whether you're autistic, you feel dehumanized. ADHD, if you're a man, you feel dehumanized. If you're a woman, you feel dehumanized. A lesbian, you feel dehumanized. If you have trauma, you feel dehumanized. It's all about dehumanization. And I think the key to healing from any of these things and to self-acceptance is to understanding that these are all manifestations of the human condition. And once we forgive ourselves for being human and that these are all human traits and that we're not alone in them, especially within the very supportive DeTrans community, that's a huge thing that's helped me, just finding that I wasn't alone in this. And we can forgive yourself for just being human. And that's the key to moving on and then finding your own humanity and in the humanity of others. And then, not to sound too hippie-ish, but like just love itself, I think is at the root again of all of this. You can call it attachment or insecure attachment or secure attachment, but I think love is at the root of all this. And if we have more love and compassion, and again, like humanity and humaneness towards our fellow people, I know all of us here do, but you know, just, I don't know, just more love would be nice.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is really beautiful. I remember being told, like, you know, if we could accept ourselves as a compassionate mess, it's, you know, it's enough to be getting along with. And I think it really is. More love. Very well said.